Trump continues to show us exactly. Trump is continuing to show us exactly the type of. I don't even know where to start with this. All right, Chicago. Let's start here. As a matter of fact, let me just show you the tweet. Let's see if I can get the tweet up on the screen. So Trump tweeted this out today. If you take a look at your screen, he said, if Chicago doesn't fix the horrible carnage going on, 228 shootings in 2017 with 42 killings, up 24% from 2016, I will send in the feds. Now, I give him credit for at least he's actually using data now. I mean, he's throwing numbers out there. I don't know how accurate they are, but, whatever. That's a big step up for Orange Julius. But all right. So there is a problem in Chicago. But how can I say this? Trump's solution is almost a non-solution. Now, let's put it in context. Let's start with some context. So Rahm Emanuel, who I think is almost as much a piece of shit as Donald Trump, but he has already requested help from the feds. But he has stated that the National Guard is out of the question, according to the Chicago Tribune. So this is not without precedent. Rahm Emanuel welcomed the offer for federal assistance to help stem all of the violence in Chicago, but he refused the offer of the using the National Guard, saying that it's antithetical, quote, it's antithetical towards helping building trust in local police. I mean, you just the idea, right? And this is why I guess there was so much hesitation in my voice up front. Like, there's something that needs to be done in Chicago, but federalizing it and essentially creating a true police state using federal forces and the threat of doing so is so far beyond the pale of anything that we've seen in America, right? It creates not only a precedent, but it creates an even more volatile situation, right? You're essentially going to make a war zone out of Chicago. And I know people say, well, it's already a war zone. Yeah. So there's a difference between people who are killing each other, citizens killing each other, and sitting in our armed military to police those forces. Our military, our National Guard, they're not trained to do policing operations, right? They're not trained to go in, and we see the great significant failing of our police, of our military forces to even be occupiers, right? They can't do that successfully. They're not trained to be a standing police. So you're asking for far more damage to be done by sending in the troops. I don't even like the nature of his threat, right? So instead of offering solutions, he's just making these threats saying that I'm going to essentially take over Chicago with the National Guard, right? That threat in itself should be a non-starter. But because he is now the president of the United States, we actually have to discuss the nuances of it, right? We should be able to say this is just the most ridiculous shit that we ever heard, but we actually have to discuss the ramifications of having a standing military inside of a city serving as the police force. So according to Chicago Tribune, they're connecting this tweet of Donald Trump back to Bill O'Reilly on Fox News, because Donald Trump is making policy based off of Bill O'Reilly. But he said in a segment on Tuesday night, on last night, that there's chaos in Chicago. And he concluded that, quote, President Trump can call in the National Guard because the governor won't. Sean Spicer, of course, he's dodging and deflecting. He didn't answer the question directly. But he did say this. He said, quote, there can be aid if it was requested up through the governor and through the proper channels that the federal government can provide on a law enforcement basis. But there's other aid that can be extended, as well as through the U.S. Attorney's Office or other means that will ensure that the people of Chicago have the resources to feel safe. Sounds nice, but That's not really what Donald Trump is talking about. And this is the sleight of hand. You know, Donald Trump says and is going to do exactly what he's saying and what he wants to do. And Sean is sent out to be the Minister of Information. But Rahm Emanuel, he said, quote, in regards to agencies besides the National Guard that actually could be of some assistance, he said it would be more useful to, quote, to use the ATF, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. He said you send the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency. He said it'd be far more useful to have more help from the FBI. All of those institutions are resources that could help them. But again, sending in the National Guard is a non-starter. There's so many problems in this story that sending in the National Guard does not address. Now, that being said, Rahm Emanuel and the city of Chicago and the governor of Illinois, they got to figure this. They got to figure this out. They've got to do something. And you can go back and check my receipts. I've got plenty of clips addressing the issue of Chicago. And I mean, that's just me. The people on the ground in Chicago are protesting. The people on the ground are calling out Rahm Emanuel, calling out the governor. The people on the ground are the ones that are demanding that something be done. So something obviously needs to be done. But the threat, this draconian, this Machiavellian threat of occupying the city with the National Guard at the behest of the governor, but on the heels of the demands of the new president, Orange Julius, is not only not a solution, but it sets a dangerous precedent that I don't believe, if this was coming from a Democratic president, anyone would tolerate. Just to be sure, if President Obama demanded to do the same thing, there would be outrage and cries of a police state, and Obama coming to seize your guns, and Obama doing this. So to be clear, on so many levels, this is problematic that I don't even know if I have if I could parse all of the problems, because we still haven't even talked about the nature of the problem. We just acknowledged that there is a problem, but we haven't talked about the nature of the problem and the economic condition of Chicago. And then when you talk about the economic condition of Chicago, you can't take it in isolation without talking about the overall economic condition of the United States and how it's very easy to have the most wealthy owning blocks away or miles away from the most impoverished areas that you can imagine. I mean, Chicago, if you're downtown Chicago, is one of the most beautiful cities that you could be in. Or you go 20 minutes south, not even 20, you go 10 minutes south, and you see the most abject poverty that you've seen in a long time. So all of the layers of problems that could be addressed to actually be a solution, Donald Trump, being Donald Trump, says that get your shit together or else I'm coming to take over your city. The difficulty of the next 4 years is going to be trying to dissect the stupidity and the bullshit that's coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. Because now we no longer have the luxury of saying, oh, it's just a tweet, ignore it, don't talk about it. This is the man who actually makes policy, or not makes policy, but with executive orders he can make policy, but he influences the policy and sets the standard, and we no longer have the luxury of ignoring it. So we have to unpack the scenario. And when you unpack this threat of sending in the National Guard, A, it's going to make the problem worse. It's going to create an occupied city. B, it's not going to solve anything. C through Z, rather, it does not address the problems of Chicago. It's just simply trying to use brute force. And who do you think is going to be on the receiving end of the brute force? It's maybe some criminals, right? But it's not just going to be criminals that are on the receiving end of this. It's going to be the citizens, the people who are not criminals, who are also going to be on the receiving end of this. Shit, if you can't get the police to understand the difference between they just pull over somebody because they're black, they're not going to distinguish. Oh, I know you're in a gang. Oh no, you're okay guy. If you can't get the police to do that, do you actually think you're going to get the National Guard to do that? It's a hammer to an ant fight. It's a hammer. It's a bludgeoning tool when you need a scalpel. They don't want solutions, man. They just want Donald Trump to showboat